Hey y'all, Boogie Night here. How's it going? And I apologize in advance if I seem a little bit hazy right now. I've gotten maybe about 5 or 6 hours of sleep over the past 2 nights, so please bear with me if this review is a little less than optimal. But I've been so excited about wanting to talk about this movie almost as long as I wanted to see this movie. So I kind of want to tell you that right then and there. And I'm talking about a movie called The Post. Now, before I go any further with this review, if historical dramas are not really your jam per se, this is probably not the review for you. But if this sort of thing is at least slightly interested in this kind of topic, go on and keep watching because I loved this movie so much. So, going back, this actually goes back before the movie even came out. This was over Christmas break when I was up in DC visiting friends and family, and my mom and I were up late watching something on TV, I forget what, and this ad came on for The Post, and we instantly looked at each other and said, we gotta go check this out. So we pulled out our phones, we checked AMC, we checked Regal, we checked Fandango, but no theater in DC was showing this movie, except I think one in Georgetown, and we were not gonna drive all the way to Georgetown to go see this before I left. So the moment I got back down here, I started checking every theater in the area to see when the times were for opening night. And luck be with me, there was actually a screening the night before opening day. So I reached out to one of my friends, and she and her husband immediately jumped on board with it. And we were not disappointed whatsoever. My God, this is a fantastic movie. So what exactly was The Post about? Well, long story short, it was about documents that were that are colloquially known as the Pentagon Papers, which in a nutshell was a 7,000 plus page, 47 volume group of documents detailing the collective history of the Vietnam and the U.S. involvement with it, from leading up before the war and to the war, and overall intent. And I'm not doing it justice, so if this is more fascinating to you, then I would look for a reputable article or maybe a website that's actually of detail, or if you're like me, just reach out to Harkov, because the man knows his stuff. I'm not really touching upon the Pentagon Papers so much because while that was an integral part of the plot, the main part of the plot was the press and freedom of the press versus the brass, as it were. So, long story short, because I really encourage you to go out and see this movie if this is your thing. I would not wait till it comes out on DVD or Blu-ray or anything. If you can find a theater, do it. Stop watching this review right now and go. It is amazing. So like I keep saying, long story short, sorry. A man who was part of the overall design and detailing and writing of the Pentagon Papers leaked the majority of them to a reporter in the New York Times. And the reporter decided to go against legal counsel's recommendations not to release them for fear that he was basically depicting how the government was basically, quote-unquote, lying to us about the overall vibe and the overall sense of the war, and that we were doing better than we actually were, and blah, blah, blah. So he published this in the New York Times, and like I said, this is actually historically true. This actually happened in the 1960s in the Nixon era. And when the White House received copy of this, they basically said that you are going against the Espionage Act of 1917, and you can either face the charges for this, or you can, refrain from posting this, take it back, you're not allowed to report any more on this. So restricting this, even though the New York Times was running on First Amendment rights, freedom of the press, that they could do this without act of, reprisals, as it were. So when the reporters that basically published this said, no, we are not going to redact this, we are not going to remove it from the press, we are not going to take it back, we stand by freedom of the press and whatnot. And this is an ongoing topic throughout the whole movie. They did not refrain from this. And I love that so much, and I'll go into reasons like that later on. So the two reporters that actually wrote this article, that they were not going to take it back and they were not going to do anything like that, any sort of thing, they were charged as felonies under the Freedom of the Press Act. But however, additional copies of the Pentagon Papers, got released to the assistant editor of the Washington Post, hence the title, Bagdicky, and I forget his first name, and then his boss, Ben Bradley. So they spend a lot of time, despite the legal counsel of the Washington Post saying, do not do this, you're not allowed to do this, we're going to get nailed to it, but they did it anyway. So there's this whole drama and tension, and I'm going to get into that in just a few minutes. But basically, the Post gets taken to court, and they win the court case of freedom of the press that we did what was right. And once again, it was really well done. I'm not doing it justice talking about the plot, but that's because I don't want to give away any more spoilers than historians or historical buffs might already know. But what you really need to know are two things about the movie that made this so fantastic. That is the character development, the actors and actresses, and three, because three is the new two, what can I say, the overall atmosphere of the movie. Starting with the cast, I'm just going to say the powerhouse duo that is probably the best I've seen in a very long time, Tom Hanks and Meryl Streep. I have not seen a better dynamic duo of movies since Road to Perdition with Paul Newman and Tom Hanks, and Casablanca with Humphrey Bogart and Ingrid Bergman, or Maltese Falcon with Humphrey Bogart and Mary Astor. Come to think of it, any person that's paired up with Humphrey Bogart is going to be a powerhouse duo. Let's not mince words here. But the interaction of those two in the movie was so well done, it was very immersive. I found it so well, perfectly put together that I was just sucked in. And it's been a very long time since a movie sucked me in hook, line, and sinker. It was amazing. Now, Tom Hanks actually plays the Washington Post editor, Ben Bradley, who is basically in charge of saying, okay, we're going forward with this, we're going forward with that, you do this, you do that. And he shares a very professional and slightly friendly personal relationship with Meryl Streep's character, who is Katharine Graham, who was the editor-in-chief of, the editor-in-chief and owner of the Washington Post. And once again, Katharine Graham actually wrote a very good autobiography on herself. It was very well done. I encourage you to go out and take a look at it. And she actually inherited the Washington Post from her late husband, who committed suicide. And they just had this incredible working relationship. At first, Katharine Graham, she's very shaky on her feet. She's not really sure what to do about the Washington Post. There's signs of struggle in her, but the way it works is it's almost like a coming-of-age movie for her. When she starts a kind of meek and slightly on the mild side, she starts getting stronger and stronger and stronger, and it's kind of built up between her legal team. She's trying to balance this work-life status as a Washington, D.C., not really socialite, but well-known person, and try and live her life while trying to figure out how to work the Washington Post after taking it over, and how a lot of allusions are drawn to her being a woman that is the head of it, and that's not really PC per se in the 1960s. And built up a lot by Ben Bradley, Tom Hanks' character. So when she kind of seems on her feet, he pushes her in kind of almost a tough love situation while she builds and garners her strength. And at times, they will definitely butt heads against each other. Certain scenes when he's like, we need to do this right now. Who cares what your legal team thinks? And she kind of waffles about it. So she'll get on the phone with her legal team, and he'll actually pick up the phone and listen in on the conversation. And if he feels like somebody's not giving her, the right direction, or somebody's cutting her off, or just being genuinely blatant, kind of ignorant towards her, he'll jump in and be like, shut the hell up, let her finish. So by the end of it, when she is basically facing down the odds of possibly being charged with a felony, much like the New York Times reporters, and her legal team is gutting her in the face, saying, this is not going to work well, our stock is going to plummet, what the hell are you doing, this is not what your husband wants. She steps up and becomes a lioness and basically like, you know what? We're going forward with this. Shut up and sit down. So it was really heartwarming to see that, because I think, now mind you, I wasn't even a gleam in the carpenter's eyes back during the time of this, but I think to a lot of my friends, both female and male, that are facing down the odds, and they don't know what to think, and myself included. I mean, when I first moved down here to Florida, I didn't know what to think. I was cut adrift. I didn't know anybody other than my boss and my friend, and all my friends and family were back up in DC, and I was definitely meek. I was definitely uncertain. When I started this vlog project, you go back to the early days when Greg and I were doing them, we didn't know what we were talking about, but by doing all these things, both in the workplace environment, and then having a couple of close-knit friends down here, like Neosonic, like my other buddy Kyle. Sorry, he doesn't have a nickname. I really found an inner strength that I did not feel back when I was in DC, because it was a different circumstance. And I think that's kind of the same case with Katharine Graham, or Meryl Streep's character. And having people down here that, and of course back in DC, that pushed me to be a better person across the front, I find that inner strength, even if they're like, dude, what the hell are you doing? So I found that very heartwarming about that. And Tom Hanks' character, Ben Bradley, he is just, I wouldn't say he's ruthless per se, but he's got a very Machiavellian feeling, and he pushes his staff to do the same thing. So he's like, you know, who cares? Get on the phone, you get on the phone, I need this, I need this, I need this. When? An hour ago. And then he's building up his strength too, because I think he's kind of, I wouldn't say hiding behind something, but he definitely has that something to prove, particularly when it's the Washington Post, which it is a mainline hitter in the national news industry, but it doesn't have as big a name as, say, the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times. And then facing down this concept that, hey, the Post could get shut down, we could lose this everything, I could go to jail, she could go to jail, my team could go to jail, this sort of thing happens. And yes, they do go to court, like I said, but it was just very brilliantly done. There was so much coming of age, I'm going to keep using that, throughout all the characters, even the minor ones. Particularly when there's a scene when they're in a crowded room, they have thousands upon thousands of pages, unnumbered, of the Pentagon Papers, and they're trying to parse it all together. And while it started as kind of individualism, like, well, I'm doing this, by the end of it, like, I have this page, I think this matches up with blah, 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 I've got that page over here. So, I mean, it's like they're almost throwing paper airplanes at each other. And I just found that so well done. And the last thing I want to talk about, it was definitely historical drama, but the atmosphere, you could cut it with a knife. There's scenes with Katharine Graham. She's trying to host a party for somebody. I think it was a birthday party. She just got news that there's the possibility that they could be shut down and she could go to jail and so much if they release this. Coming from the White House, of course, and the White House's legal counsel, just like the New York Times. And Ben Bradley's like, we've got to do this. And she's like, I can't, I've got a party to attend to. And she's walking out there, and you see the plastic smile on her face while she's trying to socialize, she's trying to live up to that upper class character that started out with her husband, that she inherited, much like the Washington Post. And she's struggling within, and you can see that with the look in her eyes, and just the gritted teeth. I mean, and I know that's not, because I do that on a regular basis, but it was amazing. And there's this scene when she is arguing with her legal counsel, and the printers are waiting to get the go-ahead to hit the button and start printing out everything, because that edition of the Washington Post was ready to go. It just was waiting to be hit and go out. So the only thing I can compare it to for something like that is in Apollo 13, when they're trying to re-switch on the main shuttle after being stuck in the lamp, and they're following these instructions to a T, and they don't know whether they're going to blow up in the atmosphere or it's actually going to work. So there's that tension with them in mission control, there's a tension with them up there in the shuttle. It's the same tension you feel in the Washington Post when they're waiting for that go, no go for launch, so to speak, from Katharine Graham. And of course, with the arguing back and forth between the reporters about, is this real, is this fake? I think that immersed me the most in it. Because let's face it, we've all been thrust into situations like that. Well, not as extreme as facing jail time, or if you don't restrain and pull this particular edition of the paper, well, maybe you have, and if you have, good on you. But it was just... And my friend, I wouldn't say she argued with me, but we had a frank discussion afterwards saying she kind of felt that wasn't really the greatest part of it. But, you know, every person has their their tastes, and, you know, good on her for that, but it was permanent from the get-go. When you see soldiers in the field in Vietnam, when you see death, you see people trying to talk about this, it was a roller coaster ride from start to finish. But it blended so well. And like I said, I mean, I'm sure parts of this movie were embellished a little bit, because I don't know what went on during the entire time. I mean, and nothing's been really documented per se for what happened at these papers, other than, you know, Pentagon Papers were, you know, released, quote unquote, to the Times and so on and so forth. But who knows what went on in the press rooms? Who knows what the overall, you know, tension was between Katharine Graham and Ben Bradley? We don't know. But what I can feel like after watching this was that there was definitely a very large modicum of truth to it. So, in closing, like I said, if you want to see something that's dramatic and a thriller with some historical background to it, I would highly encourage it. If you just kind of want to say, you know what, that's fine too. But if at least one of those three categories slightly appeals to you, I would encourage you to go check this movie out. It is worth every dime. So anyways, with that being said, it's getting kind of late over here, so I am going to fix dinner and take it easy. So other than that, y'all have a fantastic evening, and I'll catch you on the flip side, alright? Peace.